Thousands of people sealed underground, cut off from the sun and the outside world, from everything they had ever known. No supply runs or any way of contact. There was truly no way back out, and they were supposed to survive down there for decades, sometimes even centuries. Which raises a question most people never actually stop to ask themselves. How did any of it work? The engineering. Where did the air come from? How did they grow food underground? What happened when someone died? What were they even wearing? And why? As the answer, when you get right down to it, is that Vault-Tec actually created something incredible. Underneath all the cruelty and the corruption and the deliberately faulty water chips, the core engineering actually worked. Most vaults kept their populations alive for centuries, in conditions that should have been impossible. This is a full breakdown of exactly how, from the blast door all the way down to the jumpsuit on your back, and most of it considerably more interesting and horrifying than you might expect. How they were built long before a door was placed, or the air scrubbers kicked into life, or the first vault dweller actually set foot inside the structure. Someone had to decide where it was going to be placed and how deep the hole needed to be. Before anything else, an actual vault needs a site to be located at, and location was far more complicated than one would think. Geological stability, above all. The purpose is to place something into the ground that will survive a direct nuclear strike, seal out all radioactive atmosphere, and have 50 years without a supply chain. That means bedrock. Solid, dense bedrock, deep enough that even a nearby warhead is fully absorbed into the surrounding Earth before it reaches the vault structure. Vault-Tec's early construction facilities and methods heavily relied on the principles of industrial and military bunkers because those were the closest engineering tradition at the time. Early Vault-Tec in California relied on the standard heavy construction methods of digging a hole, pouring concrete structures, and installing structural steel. These were time-consuming, expensive, but effective to define what a vault needed to be. In later generations, the approach to construction shifted towards prefabricated units. Vault-Tec discovered the principles of modular construction, where vast sections of a vault would be manufactured at an off-site factory and dropped into place to be linked to the surrounding sections. This dramatically reduced the construction time on site, allowed for far greater scalability than previously possible. Many East Coast vaults, like those in Boston or West Virginia, are almost entirely prefabricated sections, which leads to much of their shared visual and structural similarities, even despite geographically distant locations. An average vault is constructed for around 220 inhabitants. This figure is a combination of how much food could be grown within a vault, what size a group needs to be for long-term genetic diversity, how much the life support system could sustain indefinitely, and what could be feasibly constructed. Certain vaults, like Vault 13, were designed for larger populations like 1,000 inhabitants, but these were incredibly complex structures to maintain. Vault 13 requires nearly 4 megawatts per hour per day to operate and requires a geothermal primary power source with a General Atomics nuclear reactor backup. All critical machinery is buried underground beneath wall panels of the main infrastructure. All of the pipes, conduits, wiring, and ventilation systems are hidden behind paneling on account of them being susceptible to accidental damage, as well as for aesthetic and psychological purposes according to Vault-Tec design standards. All that is visible from a vault corridor is the finished wall panel. Behind is the hidden infrastructure that keeps everyone alive. The compartmentalization principle is inherent to Vault-Tec's design philosophy. The construction worker was meant to only know what their task was for that day. After the concrete shell had been placed in the bedrock and all paneling had been sealed, there was a single door between the vaults and the outside world that had to be perfect. The vault door. That door is the very first thing that greets you in every Fallout game. That shape, that rotation, that size. There is a reason for them. They are not for aesthetics. The vault door is the one aspect everyone recognizes it by, and rightly so. It really is one of the finest pieces of pre-war engineering on display anywhere. While there were a few different varieties of vault door throughout the program, the CLN Safe model series being the most common, they all shared a similar core engineering principle. A colossal circular disc of steel-reinforced concrete composite housed in a frame cut directly into the bedrock, which rotated open and closed rather than swinging or sliding. The rotating motion spread the enormous mass of the door evenly across the frame as it moved, and the door has that distinctive look because of that. It's not just big, because Vault-Tec wanted it to look imposing. It's round because that is mechanically the correct shape for such a massive object of its kind. Vault-Tec advertised a 1,763,497 to 1 chance of failure. The internal figure was actually a 2% chance of failure in case of a direct hit. Still remarkable for its time, but less impressive than the Vault-Tec marketers led everyone to believe. Vault-Tec was always a lot better at selling than at telling the truth. It was designed to be a hermetic seal once closed. In the technical engineering sense of the term, airtight. When a vault sealed on October 23, 2077, closing the door cut off all communication with the outside world, and by extension, the external atmosphere. There would be no air or gas exchange whatsoever, and the outer face of the door would stand exposed to an environment soon to be awash in radioactive contamination, while the inner face maintained the vault's sterile integrity. The hermetic seal requirement also accounts for why every vault entrance involves an airlock sequence as opposed to the single main door. Anyone or anything from outside the vault, post-seal, would represent an inevitable contaminant vector, and the airlock offered a controlled environment in which to scan, decontaminate, and evaluate any would-be entrants before allowing them into the actual vault interior. Most of the vaults were equipped with atmosphere scanning and contaminant detection devices at their entries. A failed scan would seal the transition chamber until the issue could be corrected. Of course, the door required power, but each model was also equipped with manual overrides for emergency use in the event of a power failure. Those varied from complex mechanisms requiring the assistance of multiple people to turn their counterparts, but the existence of them helped ensure that even sealed vault doors weren't truly an impenetrable barrier. It was almost impossible to get in from the outside, but easy to get out, or into safety from one's surroundings. From the inside with power and a password. And power, this door, and every single system beyond it, requires power, a steady flow of it indefinitely, below ground, and without the option to call an outside service engineer ever. Power. Systems. A vault at full capacity draws more electricity than most pre-war towns. Every light, every pump, every terminal, every auto dock, all of it running on systems that could never be switched off. The vault ran on electricity, the lights, and the water purification, the air recyclers, and the food production facilities. Power in a sealed underground structure is not a luxury. It is life and death, something the engineers who designed the vaults recognized even while the corporate office was saving money wherever it could. The main power source for most of the vaults was geothermal, where the ground at the site was suitable. Geothermal had several obvious advantages for an underground structure. The heat source was the earth you were already in. It produced no gases that needed to be vented to the surface, and there was no need for deliveries of fuel. Geothermal plants have, as long as a sufficient thermal gradient exists in the local geology, on geologic timescales, which is very long, and assuming adequate infrastructure is built, theoretically, endless power. For vaults designed to keep people alive for 50 to 200 years, geothermal was the best answer when the ground was conducive. Where geothermal was impractical, nuclear power plants were used. Standard General Atomics reactors, which were standard for industrial power plants in the pre-war USA, were capable of fitting inside a vault. They were reliable, required relatively infrequent maintenance from specialized workers, and could output enough electricity for a full vault's needs. Vault 13, housing 1,000 residents instead of the more typical 220, utilizing both geothermal power as the primary source and a General Atomics reactor as a secondary source. Even that was pushing its limits under normal circumstances. Critical systems were on independent power circuits bypassing the main distribution. A vault that has lost its lights is uncomfortable. One that has lost its air recycling is sealed and will suffocate in a matter of hours. This philosophy of redundancy was extended to the location of power production. Power plants, be they geothermal or nuclear, were placed in the deepest, most secure sections of the vault, farthest from any potential breach, and surrounded by an additional buffer zone of concrete and steel. Getting to a vault's power plant would likely mean navigating some of the most secure areas of the facility. It was part safety and part the acknowledgement that power was the one system that could not afford to fail. Power kept the lights on, but what it was really sustaining, more than anything else in a sealed underground space, was the air. And managing that turned out to be an engineering problem all of its own. AIR and atmospheric systems underground, in a hermetically sealed space, air is not really a given, but a finite resource, and Vault Tech treated it exactly that way. An underground hermetically sealed environment populated with many people is consuming oxygen and releasing carbon dioxide at a known rate. Dealing with this exchange is one of the simplest engineering challenges a vault would face, and the approach Vault Tech took to this problem was a closed-loop atmosphere processing system, treating the atmosphere not as a resource to be consumed slowly, but as a fluid resource to be processed continually. At the heart of the atmosphere processing system is the network of air processing units spread throughout the vault that draw in the existing atmosphere and force it through a number of stages, filtering out CO2, particulates, contaminants, and biological matter before circulating it back through the vault. The CO2 captured by the filtration system is not released into the void. It is instead used to feed the vault's plant-growing facilities, where it is used as input to photosynthesis and is thereby transformed into oxygen. These two agricultural components, together with the respiration of the population, constitute a single closed-loop system feeding on the citizens and their needs. Temperature and humidity are both actively controlled throughout the vault. An underground facility by definition will be thermally buffered from its surroundings. However, a vault filled with people and active power generation units will be radiating significant amounts of heat. This is overcome by a number of systems systems that allow control over the ambient temperature independently of the exterior geology of the facility, and a dweller of such a vault might experience it as simply the way it is, never realizing the engineering needed to accomplish it. The ventilation ducting is something that every vault dweller who has spent more than a few minutes inside a vault notices, both because the ducts themselves are visible in the most vaults, and because they are frequently used as transit methods for protagonists and antagonists in their treks through the vault. The ducts are large enough for an individual to crawl through because they are sized to accommodate and transfer a considerable amount of air, and any duct system designed such that its maintenance cannot physically be accessed by some means is by definition an element that is guaranteed to fail at some point with no means of remedy. The Vault-Tec designers provided the ability to physically access and work on the ventilation ducts from the very beginning. It also just happens to provide a convenient shortcut from one side of the vault to the other, which can prove useful to inhabitants. Atmospheric contaminant detection and management systems are also continuously monitoring the air supply using sensors distributed throughout the vault to detect anomalies, abnormal gas levels, or life support failures that the central atmospheric management computer will correct before anyone in the vault notices that a problem occurred. Some vaults utilize airlock contaminant sensors to ensure that any chemical or biological threat from the outside world does not make its way inside to contaminate the main habitation areas. Air recycle. The next problem is water. Again, in a closed loop without an external supply, the solution to that one is a good deal less appealing than the air system. Water, there is a reason the original Fallout game begins with a broken water chip. Of every system in the vault, water was the one that could not fail even for a single day. If anything, the resource limitation defining the potential of a vault more than any other is water. Food can be made by some method or another, but water cannot, and a sealed, closed facility with a fixed population has a finite supply of water that must be sufficient for eternity, which means recycling isn't an option. It's the entire strategy. Each and every vault had a water recycling and purification system capable of processing, filtering, and returning to usage. Essentially every single drop of water that was in the facility. This includes the water residents would drink, the water necessary for producing food, the water consumed by the mechanical systems operating the vault itself, and even the water contained in human waste. These purification systems were sophisticated enough to take sewage and convert it into drinkable water, which was a concept the dwellers of vaults universally knew, yet tried not to think about in practice. The water chip is the portion of this system every Fallout player recognizes, simply because the central premise of the original Fallout game centers around one of these malfunctioning. At the core of the purification system was the processing and control unit. The water chip managed filtering cycles, monitored water purity, and ensured proper water distribution flow through the entire system. In Vault 13, this resulted in the water supply becoming increasingly unsafe for habitation within days of its malfunction in 2161, forcing the Overseer to send out the Vault Dweller in search of a replacement within a 150-day time frame. The system, it turned out, simply did not have enough backup reserves for the 1,000 residents for longer than that period. The irony, and the one detail that explains, more than any other about Vault-Tec's actual operational efficiency, was that the intended destination of the replacement chip was Vault 15, but was missing upon arrival. A supply chain and shipping failure that, the Fallout Bible notes, had been plaguing the Vault project from the beginning, in the same breath with its sophisticated closed-loop water systems. Certain vaults, built atop underground water tables that could be reached via wells dug within the facility itself, allowed for the use of natural water input, significantly decreasing the load on the purification machinery and giving the overall system a margin of safety that was absent in entirely sealed vaults. Water distribution within the vault was a high-pressure piped network that reached all corners of the facility. Residential sections, for instance, had taps, the agricultural sections had irrigation networks, and even the medical bay had a separate water supply for the autodocks, but all shared a singular underlying system whose flow was constantly monitored by vault technicians, a profession as vital, if not more so, than the others depending on societal position within the vault. With water handled, the next question was calories. Growing enough food for hundreds of people underground without soil or natural light turned out to be one of the harder engineering challenges in the entire program. Food production, no windows or seasons, no soil to work with at all, just artificial light, nutrient solution, and the hope that 4 types of vegetables never get old. They do, but the system kept people alive anyway, sustaining the calories needed to feed a vault's population indefinitely, deep underground, with no access to sunlight and without any way of access to traditional soil, was one of the most difficult engineering tasks of the entire program. And the approach Vault-Tec utilized a combination of different techniques because a single one simply wouldn't do. Hydroponics was the foundation. Vaults were built with dedicated agricultural areas where hydroponic growing chambers would be housed. These are growing systems which grow plants in a nutrient-rich solution instead of soil, and which have a spectrum tailored for photosynthesis. Controlled environment hydroponics offers many benefits over conventional growing systems. Plants can be grown in several levels simultaneously. The water used can be more efficiently utilized as it's recycled rather than wasted by drainage. The precise nutrient balance can be maintained, and the climate controlled such that year-round growing is possible without dependence on seasons. This approach is energy intensive, as a controlled, artificial environment requires a great deal of artificial lighting to support it at a vault's capacity, which explains the significant size and robustness of the vault power systems. The crops chosen for hydroponic farming were selected on caloric content, complete nutritional values, and yield per square meter of space. They were primarily root vegetables, grains, legumes, and leafy greens. While certainly a nutritious diet, it is by no means an inspiring one, and the terminal entries across various vaults demonstrate that most dwellers grew weary of the monotony after a few years. This was no oversight. The purpose of vault food production was the survival of its dwellers rather than a culinary experience, and in that regard, variety took a backseat to calories. Protein was a more challenging problem to solve. Some vaults used insects in order to produce their biomass, as they can produce relatively large amounts of protein for a given area, and they utilize food waste. Others rely solely on plant-based proteins, though some kept limited numbers of birds or rabbits as livestock, which, of course, is much harder to maintain and control given the specific requirements of the sealed vault environment. Prepackaged food supplies are another major component of each vault. While still containing substantial amounts of preserved foods after they sealed, this supplemented their agricultural efforts. The foods initially provided an emergency buffer, while the hydroponic systems reached full production capacity within the first weeks after vault sealing. The vault's residents received daily portions of either fresh, hydroponically grown or packaged food, distributed by use of a ration coupon system that ensured each dweller received their specific amount of caloric input daily. This is another feature that shows the value and necessity of a controlled economy when dealing with a finite resource, an essential and crucial factor in a closed system where waste is detrimental and overconsumption is fatal. The growing areas are not distinct from the atmosphere control of a vault. Like residential areas are, plants take in carbon dioxide and produce oxygen, in addition to regulating humidity within the vault. Consequently, agricultural areas are a vital component of the vault's atmospheric system. In the event that a portion of the hydroponics are compromised, it not only creates food shortages, but it begins to destabilize the vault's atmosphere in the opposite direction, which is detrimental to all the dwellers. The vault could feed and hydrate its population, but hundreds of people sharing the same sealed air for decades also get sick, get injured, and need medical care, with no hospital and no way to call for help from outside. Healthcare and the Autodoca sealed population, close quarters, decades of shared air. The medical system was not a luxury. It was the difference between a vault that survived and one that did not. A sealed population of hundreds of people living in close quarters for decades faces specific healthcare challenges that the vault's medical systems had to address without any possibility of referring a difficult case to an outside specialist, without access to the broader pharmaceutical supply chain, and without the option of simply waiting for someone to get better in a less stressful environment. The Autodoc was Vault-Tec's answer to most of these problems. Installed in the medical bay of every vault, the Autodoc was an automated medical treatment system capable of performing diagnostics, administering medications, conducting surgical procedures, setting broken bones, treating radiation exposure, managing chronic conditions, and delivering basic mental health interventions, all without requiring a human physician to be present for the procedure. The system drew on pharmaceutical supplies stored in the vault's medical dispensary and was updated periodically through the vault's internal software systems with new treatment protocols. In vaults where a trained physician was present, the Autodoc served as the physician's primary tool, extending their capability beyond what they could accomplish manually and allowing a single doctor to manage the health needs of the entire vault population. James, the lone wanderer's father in Fallout 3, served as Vault 101's doctor for 19 years, and credits the Autodoc as the technology that made it possible for one physician to provide adequate care to a sealed community of that size. In vaults without a trained physician, the Autodoc operated autonomously. Terminal entries document cases where it addressed the presenting symptom without recognizing an underlying condition. Good enough to keep people alive in most circumstances, not a replacement for actual medical training. And Vault-Tec knew that when they built it, pharmaceutical production was also built into some vaults. The vault's stores of medications were finite if they relied solely on preloaded supplies, so more sophisticated facilities included basic synthesis equipment capable of producing common medications from precursor chemicals that were far more stable and longer lasting than the finished pharmaceuticals themselves. This extended the vault's medical autonomy significantly, but required vault residents with pharmaceutical training to operate, adding another critical specialization to the list of skills a vault community needed to maintain. Every person kept alive is also producing waste, and in a closed loop with no outside, that waste has nowhere to go unless the vault has a deliberate plan for it. Waste management. In a sealed system, there is no outside. Nothing leaves. Everything that enters either gets converted into something useful or becomes a problem. In a sealed system, waste is not something you can simply dispose of. Every material that enters the vault either gets recycled into something useful or becomes a problem that compounds over time. Vault-Tec's approach to waste management reflected this constraint directly. Organic waste, food scraps, sewage, biodegradable materials was processed through the vault's biological waste systems, which broke it down into components that could be reintroduced into the food and water cycles. Human waste processed through the water purification system. Organic food waste composted or fed into the hydroponic nutrient systems as raw material. Nothing that could be converted back into a resource was simply discarded, because in a closed loop, there was nowhere to discard it to. Non-organic waste, broken equipment, worn-out materials, items that could not be repurposed, went to incineration. Every vault had incineration receptacles positioned throughout the facility, and residents were required to place their non-recyclable trash into these on scheduled burning days. The incineration system reduced solid waste to ash and captured the heat generated as a minor additional energy input to the vault's systems. Ash residue was compact, stable, and could be accumulated in designated containment areas for the vault's operational lifetime without creating a sanitation problem. The most depressing application of the incineration system was for deceased residents. In a sealed environment, burial is not really an option. The vault's protocol was incineration, both the most practical solution and the one requiring the most cultural adjustment for residents from traditions that treated burial as the proper way to handle the dead, waste sorted. Now for something that looks trivial by comparison but turns out to be more deliberate than almost anything else in the vault, what everybody was wearing. The vault. Jumpsuit. The jumpsuit is so recognizable it became one of gaming's most iconic images. That did not happen by accident. Every detail of it was a decision. While less of an engineering feat compared to the technology that kept the air and water safe, the Vault jumpsuit is worth discussing because what it was, and why Vault-Tec designed it in such a specific way, was far more purposeful than you might think. The jumpsuit was a single, one-piece garment. It was made in Vault-Tec's distinctive yellow and blue color scheme, which would be found on every Vault-Tec product, and was branded clearly on the back of each suit. The color scheme was chosen because of brand awareness. It matched the Vault Boy and every piece of propaganda the Vault-Tec Corporation had ever produced, as well as because yellow and blue stand out best against the lighting environment of a vault. The TV show's pre-war sequences reveal that Barb Howard noted the color was inspired by Cooper Howard's blue and gold outfit from his Western films, which the company had licensed for its advertising. Materially, the suit was designed to be worn doing the work that Vault inhabitants were actually doing. The concept designer for the Fallout 3 suit states, "I wanted something that was made for heavy-duty, almost denim-like fabric, that it could take a beating whether you were working with heavy machinery or you were crawling around the pipes in a vault facility." This did fit the tasks performed by an actual vault worker. The jumpsuit wasn't supposed to be attractive. It was meant to be workwear that could stand up to whatever was going on in the environment you were wearing it in. The suit was also biometric. The sensors in the jumpsuit recorded the wearer's vital signs and relayed simple health data to the vault systems, the overseer's work system, and, most importantly, the medical facility that perpetually monitored your health. While this was marketed as a feature to the residents of the vault, and it also acted as a surveillance system, knowing where every inhabitant of the vault was and what their current physical state was at all times. When a vault was sealed, anyone who got in was instructed to switch into their assigned vault jumpsuit immediately. Vault stocked these suits, and they could be issued out in vacuum-sealed packets, 10 suits per box, to residents arriving that did not have time to pick up their individually assigned suit. Personal clothing was not to be worn due to contamination concerns, but because Vault-Tec knew that people needed uniformity in a vault. Having one cohesive look to everybody would mean less individual identity to each person. More unity and more of a group mentality would be better for controlling a group of people for an extended period of time. A jumpsuit that was no longer working would be replaced using manufacturing within that vault. All vaults should have a minimal amount of textile manufacturing ability in order to replace work suits when they wear out. There would also be specialized variants of the jumpsuit for the different jobs that residents had in a vault. For the maintenance workers that work in narrow areas, a dirtier and less padded version that will be known as the utility suit without forearm pads, and a suit with white fabric and a lab coat for medical and science workers, along with the security suit that had plating around the body for the vault's police force. Basically, each role in the vault was designated a suit that, in the absence of any other identifier, you could identify someone's role within that vault. The suit was one layer of Vault-Tec's monitoring infrastructure. The other one was strapped to your wrist. The Pip-Boy every player character wears one. Most people never stop to think about what it actually was inside the vault, and what Vault-Tec was quietly using it for. If the vault door is the thing everyone recognizes from the outside, the Pip-Boy is the thing everyone recognizes from the inside. Worn on the left wrist of every vault resident, the personal information processor, manufactured by Robco Industries under a joint venture with Vault-Tec, was the resident's interface with the vault's systems. Their health monitor, their radio receiver, their map, their inventory manager, and their connection to the vault's information network. A Pip-Boy was not standard issue to a new resident. New arrivals were first required to participate in an orientation session with the Overseer, detailing the functionalities of the Pip-Boy and outlining its everyday use, during which they also had to complete a personal information processor responsibility form. This form asks about dominant hand, preferences, arm circumference, and jumpsuit dimensions, as the Pip-Boy had to be custom fit for the specific user and its band to fit accurately around the arm. Calibration to the user's dominant hand also needed to be performed on the Pip-Boy 3000, and as an incorrectly fitting Pip-Boy was too uncomfortable for everyday wear, Vault-Tec had to make residents accustomed to using the device, as it also served as one of their primary tools of surveillance. Pip-Boy 3000s are what the player is equipped with for all of the Fallout games except Fallout New Vegas, which issued the player the Pip-Boy 2000 Mark 6. These models are a combined Vault-Tec and Robco venture, and are what are installed in later model vaults. Older vaults have earlier Pip-Boy models, as Vault 76 in West Virginia, 2076, has Pip-Boy 2000 Mark 6, as they opened a year prior to the bombs falling and therefore are behind in development of advanced technology. This integration continued into vault management, as Pip-Boy 3000s are automatically updated with newer information when the wearer approaches any sort of vault terminals they are entitled to access. Its monitoring functions feed into a medical bay surveillance system, and the wearer's location is readily available to any vault manager wishing to track the resident's position. The Pip-Boy, for anyone raised within a vault, was the equivalent to the shoes on your feet, worn during all daylight hours, and understood as a part of your person. The moment that any protagonist has to emerge from the vault and experience a world that does not know what it is, or has the technology capable of producing it, is truly disorienting. The Pip-Boy tracked your location, your health, your vitals, in real time. All of that data fed to one person, the one responsible for running everything, vault governance. All of this infrastructure needed someone to manage it, someone with access to every camera, every system readout, every Pip-Boy data feed in the facility. That someone was the Overseer. All of this infrastructure, the power, the air, the water, the food, the medical systems, the waste management, needed someone to manage it, and that someone was the Overseer. The Overseer was the vault's chief administrator, final authority on all operational decisions, and the primary point of contact between the residents and Vault-Tec's institutional framework. The position was not elected, at least not initially. The first Overseer of any vault was appointed by Vault-Tec before sealing, selected through the company's training programs, which is to say through Vault-Tec University, and given a comprehensive briefing on the vault's operational parameters, maintenance schedules, and in most cases, the experiment the vault was running. Whether that briefing extended to telling the Overseer the full truth about what the experiment was designed to measure varied from vault to vault and from Overseer to Overseer. The Overseer's quarters were typically connected to the main operations center, the room containing the vault's master terminal, through which the Overseer could monitor every system in the facility, review resident health data fed by the Pip-Boys, access security camera feeds, and interface with Vault-Tec's remote monitoring infrastructure during the period when that infrastructure was still operational. The Overseer saw everything. That was the design intent, and the position's authority was structured to match its information access. Security was the Overseer's operational arm. Every vault maintained a security force, typically wearing the armored variant of the vault suit and armed with whatever weapons Vault-Tec had seen fit to supply. Security enforced the vault's rules, managed conflicts between residents, controlled access to restricted areas, and, in the cases where Overseers decided that a resident had to be dealt with in ways that the community would not voluntarily accept, carried out those decisions. The relationship between vault security and the general population is one of the most consistent themes across the vault terminal entries in every game. Security forces that started as a public safety function and gradually became the tool through which Overseers maintained control as vault populations grew restless, frustrated, or simply unwilling to follow the rules any longer. The role of Overseer became effectively hereditary over time. Overseers selected their successors from amongst people they knew and worked with, building an informal ruling family through the decades. At the 50-year mark, an obvious hierarchy between the Overseer's kin and their subjects is present in the food they receive, the housing provided, and the avenues of decision-making available. This was in keeping with Vault-Tec's belief that undisputed rule provides greater stability than citizen participation. occupation. The overseer had the tools to keep every system running indefinitely. Whether the vault itself stayed intact was a different question, and the answer was almost never the engineering's fault. The result of it all, when you put all of it together, what you have is one of the most complete and self-sufficient closed-loop human habitation systems ever designed. It works. In the ways it was supposed to work, the engineering actually functions. Vaults did protect their populations from nuclear fallout, and they did sustain life for decades, in some cases well past the design lifetime, in conditions that would have been unsurvivable on the surface. The water recycling kept people from dying of thirst, the atmospheric systems kept people from dying of asphyxiation, while the hydroponic systems kept people from starving, and the autodocs kept people from dying of preventable medical conditions. None of that is trivial, and none of it was any easy to build. The reason you spend every Fallout game walking through vaults that have gone wrong, finding populations that destroyed themselves or were destroyed by their own overseers or killed each other over resources or simply went mad in the dark, is not that the engineering failed. In most cases, the engineering was still running when you arrived. The water purification is still processing, the power plant is still generating, and the lights are still on. What failed, almost universally, was the social structure. Vault-Tec designed the physical engineering to last, but they designed the social structures to crack under pressure, because cracking social structures produce data, and data was what the program was actually for. The Vault works perfectly as a machine. As a home, as a place where real people were supposed to actually live, it was always going to be something else entirely. If you've enjoyed the video and want to see the 7 deadly sins as Fallout characters, click the video on the screen.